right, welcome back, everyone. You are watching to the Brew Crew podcast. I'm joined with my co-host, Mr. Ewan Lake.
Jake.
Looking very professional there with the studio mic. And then Mr. Alex Rosas, who appears to be in a coffee shop.
Hey, Jake. Yeah, it's pretty loud over here, so lucky I can hear you guys.
And this is a special podcast today because we're doing our very first interview with none other than Mr. Garrett King. Garrett, welcome to the Brew Crew podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Sipping some coffee, enjoying this Tuesday, and excited to be here.
Great. I love that. It sounds like you're totally dialed into the program because our first segment is always "What's in the cup?" What are you drinking?
Oh, okay, great.
What did you drink at least? There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, it's quite late in the day for coffee for me, but I've got a long night ahead of me. So this is from La Cabra. I was actually in New York a couple of weeks ago and chatting with Ian, their coffee director. Really fun conversation about water, of course, but this is a bag I picked up. It is a Typica varietal from Ecuador, I believe, and it's fermented in rum barrels for like 150 hours.
Yeah, it's rum aged.
I think the taste, the title or tasting notes they put on the bag was like fruity and wild, and it lives up to that. It's really fun.
Nice. How did you brew it, Garrett?
I did my favorite recently has just been on the Kalita 155, which is the flat bottom dripper, and I just brew a little tiny cup and enjoy it that way.
Love that. Great.
Yeah. Perfect coffee water.
So, of course.
Yeah.
You actually, did you go to La Cabra when you were in Europe? Did you make it to them?
I didn't actually. We made it to some great coffee spots, but we didn't make it to there, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw you and acquaintance of yours, Brian Kwan from Fellow. He did an interview with Say Coffee over in New York, but then Jake sent us this follow-up video of they went to La Cabra for part of the day, and it looks absolutely amazing experience.
Cafe there is beautiful. They have these incredible pastries. Had a couple of them, and of course, amazing coffee. So yeah.
That's great.
That's awesome. In my cup, I have some of speaking of Fellow, the Nomad Burundi, I think it was. They did in the Fellow drop a couple weeks ago. Super good. I did it on the Aurea V3. I've been kind of like you. Like I used to brew on the Kalita 155, but I love those 10 to 12 gram, smaller brews because you can do more throughout the day, but not get too caffeinated. So
for sure.
Love that.
Jake, what do you got?
I made a latte.
Did you not brew? Okay.
No, I did. I brought back some beans. I was in Portland last weekend, or just this last weekend, and brought back some Proud Mary. So Rainbow's End Proud Mary blend. Yeah, just a latte, whole milk, nothing fancy.
Nice. That's great. Well, it's still early in the day for me, so I'm drinking this is a lactic natural processed Panama from Apollon Gold. Which is tasting notes of peach and strawberry. It's really good. So brewed that as a turbo shot. So straight espresso. It's really good.
I thought for a second you had written down what it was, but you're actually just looking at the card.
Yeah, they come with these like little kind of description cards on the processing method and elevation and various things. So it's pretty cool. And of course, not sponsored, but was using Perfect Coffee Water. So
we should start these videos.
Well, that brings us back to you, Garrett. Our first question, I'm sure everyone wants to know kind of just what your origin in coffee was. How did you get into coffee? What was the first coffee you ever drank? Tell us just a little bit about, how you found yourself where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. And one of these days we'll have to get my co-founder and brother, Cortland, on the podcast because he is really responsible for getting me into coffee. But yeah, a couple questions there. How did I get into coffee? What was like a first coffee? It was back in the college days. drank a lot of coffee, but it was always these, now I look at them as, pretty trash lattes from different places, just for the caffeine, really. And then I started to take a look at my health and different things, and I was like, oh man, this is all this dairy and sugar that I'm just pounding all day is probably not the best for me. So I started brewing just black coffee. And my brother at the time, co-founder of Perfect Coffee Water, Cortland, was working in coffee. I think technically when I started brewing, he was at like Pete's Coffee at the time. So just kind of dipping his toes, but he was kind of friends with some specialty coffee roasters. And then of course, later he went on to go work for some specialty coffee roasters and learn more and more about brewing. He started teaching classes and started educating people on different brew methods and how to make great coffee at home. And while he was doing that for his work, he was also doing that for me up in Seattle. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. And, totally basic, probably story you've heard a lot is that I don't remember who the roaster was. It might have been Beacon Coffee, which is one of our first
Oh yeah.
important work. But I had this coffee that it's like the classic blueberry Ethiopia. You brew it on like a pour over, and it's just so sweet and fruity and delicious. And that's totally my jam when it comes to coffee. Like the fruitier, the better, the sweeter, the better. Of course, without adding sugar, right? So yeah, that was kind of my intro. And then once I realized that you can brew really amazing, delicious coffee without, putting all these additives in it, I was like, all right, this is my jam. Let's try this out. And I got deeper and deeper into it.
So it was a combination of, I need to do something healthier, but still get the energy and the caffeine out of coffee.
Yep.
And then kicked off by your brother. How cool.
Yeah, and I love the experimentation aspect of it. I think it's fun to try new things, and that's what's really cool about specialty coffee is you could have a different coffee pretty much every day of the year. There's so many different roasters out there. Of course, it's a little bit absorbent. I don't recommend it, but the variety is so vast when it comes to coffee. So it keeps you entertained, I would say, from that perspective.
Isn't that, I love how that's like the unifying, how people get into drip coffee and pour overs is, oh yeah, I had like an Ethiopian natural and tastes like blueberries. I'm pretty sure that was what it was for me, is like the first coffee I remember having was, just a fruit bomb of like, whoa, what is this? That's funny. I think everyone who's into coffee has had that, like, that epiphany of where you just realize, wait a second, there's more than Starbucks or McDonald's drip. So.
More than just the bitter notes. Alex, what do you call that? Is that like the fruit bomb experience?
Lotus, the flower bomb.
The flower bomb.
It's the, you're with your friends that still drink like French roast with cream and sugar, and you're like, you don't need cream and sugar if you brew well enough. Like it has plenty of its own flavor if you know how to extract it.
For sure. There's been a couple times where I've brewed like a pour over on the origami or a Kalita or something, and it's a really great quality coffee. And people who aren't used to specialty coffee will drink it and it's like a dessert coffee. Like a dessert wine, but like a dessert coffee. And I was like, oh, that's a good way to describe it. So yeah.
So then how did you go from there, from that kind of first interest in coffee to then kind of coming up with the idea of Perfect Coffee Water? How did that idea build?
Yeah, great question. Can I give a plug for Perfect Coffee Water?
Yeah, maybe.
Absolutely.
I mean, there might be a lot of people listening.
Yeah,
there might be a lot of people listening to the podcast that are not sure what Perfect Coffee Water is. So maybe give us a quick overview.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it all is real quick. You all know, of course, you've used it to brew with, but it is a mineral supplement that was designed to optimize your water for brewing coffee. So when you brew coffee, it's the ions in the water, the minerals that are interacting with the acid and the sugar chains to extract the different flavors. So by using, water that's minerally optimized for brewing coffee, you're going to get the most flavor from it. You're going to extract all the goodness, less of the bitter notes. So that's the whole idea behind what it is. Of course, we sell it in that cute little box that you showed earlier. Comes with a bunch of packets, and then you pour it into a gallon of distilled or reverse osmosis water, which is basically empty water, meaning there's not a bunch of ions. There's no, obviously if you're here in Seattle, you can like filter the tap water, get rid of the chlorine and the fluoride and a majority of the minerals, and then add it to that. But yeah, rewinding it, kind of the origin of perfect coffee water. It was back to that story of just kind of learning all about coffee earlier. It was probably 4 or 5 years back. I was down visiting Cortland, and he's in California, and we're brewing in the kitchen. I step into the kitchen. There's this white powder all over his counter, and this.
Oh no!
I was like, for a second, I just come down to visit, whatever. I was like, hey, bro, like, what is this? Should I be concerned right now? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, don't worry about it. Let me show you real quick. I'm making water for brewing coffee. So, and this is kind of back when he was teaching a lot of classes, helping a lot of people brew better coffee at home. And so he blends up these minerals, right? And he's literally got this like lab scale testing these things out, adds it to water, brews me a bunch of delicious coffee. And he's like, the water you use for coffee matters. And I was like, holy cow. And it was a light bulb moment for me. And then later that weekend, I saw him teach a class to a bunch of people at Beacon Coffee. And he was talking about, and of course, down in Southern California, if you've been there, if you visited, if you drink any water from the tap, it's horrendous. Like the EPA.
You're not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the EPA says don't drink that water. Like it's way too many, there's way too many minerals in it. It's not balanced. It's all these things. So anyways, the water's terrible. So he was helping people understand like, hey, you got to at least filter it. If you can, if you want to get crazy and nerdy, and you can buy all these bulk minerals and mix it up and things like that. And so that's when I looked at him and said, hey, why don't we not only educate people, why don't we just make an easy solution for people to add, minerals to their water, have good water for brewing coffee. And, we started to think about it like vintners for wine, they control the water. They're dialing in all the minerals. Like beer brewers, they're dialing in all the minerals. But when it comes to coffee, you've got these coffee roasters who spend, well, not only that, like you've got the farmers, the producers, and then the roasters, just hundreds of hours go into the process. And then you sell the whole bean bag of coffee, and then that person brings it home, and they may use tap water, and it totally just destroys the coffee. I mean, yeah, it still tastes okay, right? But like if you're pulling tap water with a bunch of chlorine in it, it can totally ruin the experience. And that like $20 bag of coffee that you just bought falls flat. So I said, hey, why don't we give people an option to kind of optimize that? And of course, we got into it. And yeah, there's other people doing it, which is exciting to hear about, and kind of made us feel less crazy about this idea of like, we'll get the best water for brewing coffee at home. So that's still a little bit long-winded, but that's the short version of it. I went back to school, kind of build up my business chops and just understand like what are the mechanics for actually like how do you start a business. We did that, and then through actually University of Washington, there was a really cool like small business accelerator program coming out of school, and a bunch of wonderful mentors here in the Seattle area that kind of helped us understand how we can make this something that's like viable to run long term. So we're still on that journey, we're still really small, but that's kind of the birth of Perfect Coffee Water to now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love at least me personally using it. So I have a bunch of packets from like I know you guys have partnered with like Luminous coffee roasters, and they always include a Perfect Coffee Water in the bag. And I think Mason one time in like a live stream or something had mentioned like, we're brewing this coffee to taste a certain way, but we're dialing it in our shop with like extreme parameters of water and grind setting. So I think like their approach, which I think is really cool, is that if they can eliminate at least one variable so that you can get as close to what they dreamt up that roast to taste like, which was your water. I think that's really cool that like you can kind of level the playing field for a lot of people, because like you said, I mean, if you've ever been to California, the water is just, it's atrocious, right? So I like that it has that like approachability to it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you. Super kind words, but also just exciting to hear about people using it in the real world. I think it's only been a couple years, and it always blows me away that there's now thousands of people in, I think, like 33 or 34 different countries so far that are brewing with perfect coffee water. So that kind of always blows me away a little bit about, just understanding how global coffee is too. And many roasters that will send coffee to so many different countries. And if you don't know what the water's like there, it's like you can't roast for like 20 different water types. So yeah, that's a big benefit that we weren't necessarily thinking of, just because it's always hard to like think really big from the get-go, but we're just thinking we want good water to brew coffee. Then all of a sudden we start chatting with roasters and they're like, we want to be able to send this all over the world and people have the same experience. So.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. So you went through the incubator with University of Washington, I think you were saying. What was it like? Tell us some stories of like kind of going through those steps and building the business, like building the website or approaching cafes to kind of generate interest. Kind of tell us some about that process.
For sure. I also have a question for Alex after this, so I'll come back to that. But the process was arduous. I think people say it over and over again, but like entrepreneurship is extremely difficult. It can be full of tons of joy and tons of reward, but yeah, it's definitely one of the most challenging things that I've ever done. I have such an amazing co-founder and obviously partner in this, and I've actually kind of stepped away from the business as of recently, just pursuing some other things. And Cortland's really running that right now and doing an incredible job as we continue to grow and help people all around the world. But the process, helped a ton to have mentors. We had actually even one mentor who was like an early executive at Starbucks and another mentor that runs retail stores in Seattle. And I'm super grateful and super thankful to have these folks taking a look at our business and our plans and basically saying, in a very kind way, saying, oh no, that's a terrible idea. You're going to want to do this. Or asking a bunch of questions that kind of like identify, oh wow, we haven't thought through this aspect of the business that's going to be really challenging. And we might want to think about it in a different way. So really thankful for community mentors. I highly recommend, like if you are starting a business, at the bare minimum, surround yourself with folks. Like I'm looking at this call right now. I mean, it's all three of you who are always brewing coffees, learning a bunch of things, sharing it with other people. Same goes when you start a business. Obviously, you just start to mix a bunch of money in there too, which always adds complexity, and it takes a lot of money to start a business. But yeah, I think that if I were to give like a key piece of advice to anyone, actually don't take my advice. I don't know what I'm talking about. But just one thing that I learned is just like how important that community is, because you get these high highs. I think back to like a really fun moment last year when James Hoffman reviewed our product against some, other products, and our sales just went through the roof, and we're like calling friends like, hey, can you help us like pack all these orders? Like this is awesome. People are hearing about this, they care about it. The high highs of like partnering with folks like Luminous, Mason and Alexa are great. Just wonderful people that want to introduce people to incredible coffees. They want to build a business in a healthy, sustainable way. So you get those really high moments, and then you get those moments that are like, I don't know how we're going to keep doing this. Like, we've never paid ourselves any money. We've poured tons of time and energy into this, and it's still a risk as far as like, the financial side of things and the longevity of it. There's still a lot of risks associated with it. And I think it's really the passion and those relationships, like the passion of good coffee and helping other people brew the best coffee, but also those relationships that really help you get through those moments of doubt and moments of how are we going to make this work? So Yeah, it's a great question. Did I answer it fully? That was probably maybe too much, who knows?
No, that's great. That's so cool to hear. I remember the day that the episode that James Hoffman released when they came out, and yeah, so cool to kind of hear a bit from your side about the emotions of what that was like and the excitement of then seeing the orders, just go through the roof, and that's cool.
Yeah, I actually have a friend that snapped a photo of me like watching the video for the first time. And it's a terrible photo. I'm not going to share it, but it was just this moment of like, it was such a beautiful moment to be captured for myself. So it was fun. So,
Yeah.
Alex,
But it's like that. Sorry, go ahead. We all
No.
talk at the same time.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's kind of like that when you're a band and you hear your song on the radio for the first time. You're like, wait, what we actually did like actually matters. So
yeah, that's a wonderful analogy. I'm gonna steal that from you. So.
It just goes to show, like, for the folks that are listening too, it's not, you can't just, you can just filter your tap water in Washington where we have really good water, but for people all over the world, that a Brita is not necessarily enough. Like, you need to brew as, as the roaster intended. This is a necessary part of coffee. And, our audience are people that are all kind of over the coffee spectrum, for the person that just got their first Chemex or their first dripper is just getting into coffee, to the person that's got the full-blown espresso setup. For all of these people, this is important to control that parameter. So, as coffee grows, as people like James Hoffman, promote you guys, hopefully people go further and further down that rabbit trail into, let me go play with new things, let me control new parameters in coffee. And what you guys are doing is amazing. So
thanks.
I
Appreciate
even think, Jake, there's an interesting point to that as well, of like, so as a guitar player, I kind of equate it to, you have a guitar and an amplifier, and you can have a great guitar but a bad amplifier, and it's not going to sound that great, versus having a not as good guitar and a really great amplifier. You're going to get a good sound at the source. And I think the coffee and water kind of has that relationship, because you could probably use perfect coffee water with like, a Starbucks roast, and it's going to be a little bit better, right? But also it's not, it's kind of like they have to work together, right? So you have to have, I have right here some Pear Cup Works. Like, you have to have like a really solid, not solid, but you have to have like decent tasting beans. And I think like this water packet is going to elevate it like to the next level, which I think is, if you're like super novice and like, I am new to coffee today, where do I start? I think that's probably another thing to call out. Like, go to your local coffee shop and see what beans that they're offering, and start there as well. So it's kind of like a both and.
Yeah. And remember that 99% of your cup is water.
Right. Unless you have a very high extraction like you, and on is decent. So.
Hey.
Well, I think I mentioned on one of our podcasts maybe a couple of weeks ago, we, Lisa and I, when we were coming back from Seattle, had a chance to do a bit of a trip through Europe on our way back. And I took my little travel kit with me to brew pour over, hand grinder and a V60. And I remember that the coffee that I brewed in each of the countries seemed like it just tasted completely different, even though I had exactly the same grinder, exactly the same beans, and exactly the same, pour over and filters. And that was kind of the first, I've been using perfect coffee water for a long time now. But that was the, and it's always, I've noticed that it's been better, but I didn't have perfect coffee water with me when I was traveling. I didn't want to carry, distilled water in these packets. And so I was just brewing with water that I had there. And I remember when I was in Iceland, my brew tasted completely different than it did when I was in Barcelona and in London. And that was the first time it really kind of clicked for me how much water really influences the flavor of your brew. It was pretty fascinating.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's fun. And to have what a wild experiment to be able to actually go to different countries. And
it was unintentional.
Yeah. We've done that.
We've been prepping for this podcast for you to be on for months, going to different countries, sampling the water.
Well, it's an honor to be here. So thank you. It reminds me of early days. I was just going to say, we would do blind taste tests. That was like, we did thousands of blind taste tests with same coffee, same brew method, oftentimes, cupping or French press, because you get the full immersion, but using different waters. And sometimes we would do it with just people rolling up to the coffee shop and to hear what they would say about it. And they're like, oh, wow, this coffee is way better than this coffee. And you're like, well, it's the same coffee, but it's different water. So that was always like fun to do and hear people's like conversation around it. So, Alex, you're going to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were going to ask a question. What was your question? And then I have some questions for you as we kind of wrap up.
Okay, let's keep sending questions around. Now, the question I had for you is, what's one of your favorite coffees you've had from Luminous? I've had some pretty bonkers.
Oh, I think actually the beginning of the year, Ewan got me. I think he's dying over there.
Ewan died, but before he died,
he drank tap water. That's what it was.
It's the New Zealand tap. It's pretty spicy. I mean, I've had quite a bit from them, but I think Ewan got me. It was a Java from Indonesia that they had, I think, like in late December. That was, it's like their Sumatra, which that was really good, because typically you think Sumatra and you think Starbucks, you think like really dark roasted, just like
it's like the earth.
Borderline Vienna roast. And I think it is a little bit more developed, but it was like such a like definition shattering version of Sumatra. And I think I've actually maybe had it twice. And every time I always like reply to them on Instagram, like, this coffee is literally crazy. Like, I think everyone should at some point try the Luminous Sumatra, because it's like, it has that kind of anaerobic-y flavor of more like really rich red, almost kind of like winey. And like when I think of Sumatra now, I just think of that, like so much flavor, came across really well on espresso if you pull like a turbo shot. So that was pretty good. I did their subscription a while ago. I'm not doing it right now, but they did a sample of like, oh no, actually we all tried it. Me, Ewan, and Jake, we tried one of their geishas and it was really good. I forget, it was like a Colombia geisha that they had.
That Sumatra
$2, but it was super good.
Got a chance to try it, and I've never, just personally, my palate's never loved Sumatras. That totally shattered my expectation for what a Sumatra could be. So I second that for sure.
Yeah, this coffee, I was just in Arizona and I got this. It's a Pear Cup Works Colombia, but the bean type is a Maragugipe. And these beans are like, they're very large. They're actually larger than average. So they're a much like larger varietal. It doesn't remind me fully of the Sumatra, but it is kind of a similar style, but obviously it's a very different region. But yeah, that one was really good. And their cold brew cans are excellent.
Those are amazing. So good. They did the koji process beans on their cold brew recently, I think. Yeah, I heard those were so good.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. Alrighty, we have we're gonna do a quick little lightning round that I think we're gonna start doing with our guests that we have on. So there'll be really light questions like, what's your 20-year plan? Just kidding. What year do you want to retire? No, they'll just be like really kind of fun, quick round questions, and then we'll wrap up here. Question number one: how many coffees per day do you have?
Ooh, I try to keep it to under 3. I aim for 1. I usually end up having a second, and sometimes on a long day like today, I have a 3rd coffee.
Yep. I always joke, when Jake and I went camping one time, we had like, how many Chemexes did we make in the span of like 2 hours? It was like 5 or 6 Chemexes. We finished one, Jake's like, all right, next batch, let's go. I'm like, whoa, I just need a cup, man. So
to be fair, we were brewing for 4 people, so
sure. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Get out of hand. Yeah, I could see it.
Okay. Next question. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what does your daily coffee routine look like? Like, what are you brewing? How are you brewing it?
Yeah, the go-to is like a quick Kalita or origami pour over. Sometimes I mess around with espresso. In my office, I have a GS3, so super spoiled. I Espresso, I really appreciate it, but it's not my go-to. Like I don't necessarily always seek it out. I love the change up. And then every once in a while, just throw an AeroPress on there. Start doing some iced coffees in the summer with an AeroPress. Oh, I'm that weird guy that makes a ton of cold brew at home too. So I just use the OXO cold brew maker. Super convenient, really easy. It's small, fits in the fridge nice, and I'll oftentimes make a batch of that. So
nice. Yeah, I got a the Hario cold brew maker from Bottomless for like a referral that I did, and I haven't used it, but I'm going to this year. So
I recommend it. Guy. So
I'm jealous.
Right.
You guys are just heading into summer, so all of the ice pour over and cold brew and.
Is it getting cold there, Ewan? What's it?
Yeah, we're other side of the world, so headed into winter. Yep.
Yep. Oh, it's a hot coffee.
Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
All right, because I think Zoom might cut us off in a second. Favorite processing method?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. I appreciate them, most all of them for what they are.
I love all my children equally.
Yeah. No, my favorite's clearly the natural process. And that also covers such a wide range too, if you really want to get into it. But what I usually seek out and love is that fruity, funkier, kind of more juicy cup of coffee, which if you ask Cortland, like Cortland's completely different than me when it comes to his palate. And he really appreciates like the washed coffee and like really respects that, which I love too, but yeah, it's got to be natural process.
Okay. And then how about best coffee you've had in like the last year? Your favorite one? Which these are all very
so spoiled. You guys, and this is where, working with so many amazing roasters around the world, I get way too spoiled. I mean, it's got to be something from Rogue Wave though, probably. Well, no, I don't know. Luminous, Rogue Wave, La Cabra, like Mikava is an amazing producer, but also roaster out of Colombia. They're, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it right, but they're Geisha Marsala. Just totally blew my mind. And it was so clean, yet so juicy and fruity. It won Cup of Excellence a couple of years ago. So obviously it's got some credibility behind it, but that cup for me specifically on a pour over, like totally blows my mind. That's probably the most standout, but I don't know, like Luminous and Rogue Wave, they're all so good right there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well said.
Great answers.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here just in case we run out of time. But before we go, Garrett, where can people find Perfect Coffee Water? Where can we buy it? Can we get it at a cafe? Do we need to go to your website? How do we get our hands on more?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of cafes that have it. If you're in Canada, go to Rogue Wave Coffee and or ECM Espresso to pick it up. It'll be a little bit easier. There are a couple distributors around the world that also have it. So DM us or email us if it's easier to find it in your country there. But if you're in the US, a bunch of coffee roasters have it. And then on our website, perfectcoffeewater.com has it. So
awesome. All right.
Alrighty. Thanks for coming, Garrett.
Thanks for joining
us.
Maybe
we'll have Cortland on too for a future episode.
You should. Honestly, he's the brains behind Perfect Coffee Water. So I was honored to have this chance to chat, but really he's the guy to talk to. So you'll have to get him on someday.
We'll do it.
Right on.
Awesome. Alrighty. Have a good night.
Cheers.
See ya.